In this tutorial we'll be simply exploring 3ds Max. I'll be using 3ds Max 2012 Student Edition. So we have a standard setup, and I'm not going to go through clicking on menus. We're actually going to start doing things, but by doing things and replicating them on your own computer, you will start learning the interface as well as learning modelling skills from the word go. How can we build things? Well, we're going to start by using standard primitives. Those standard primitives that we have available are here, and we'll start with a box. I'm just going to draw on the perspective view, hold down the mouse, draw a square, let go of the mouse and pull upwards to complete the height. If you don't like what you've got some details over here you can adjust straight away. You can enter some numbers, so we'll put say 40 in there for the length, and it changes immediately when I hit enter or when I click in another window. If you're just gauging things by eye, then don't click on the arrows, that's really painful. Grab an arrow by pushing down with the mouse and pull up or down, and then you can size things quite easily and quickly just by using your eyes. Don't ignore this section down here called length segments. Quite often with rectangles we want to subdivide a lot more than the default, which is 1, 1 and 1. So I'm going to change that to 4 all round. And in the other views we can see that there are more lines that have been put on the sides and ends and the top. Can't see that in the perspective view. What's going on there? Well, 3ds comes with a couple of different states or ways of looking at views. We're going to actually use the F3 key. Suddenly we can see the lines. That's called a wireframe view and quite useful for some sorts of modelling. And certainly the default in the front and top and left views. So F3 will toggle the skin on and off. F4 will allow us to see the lines as well as the skin. And you can do that in any of the different viewports. To change to a different viewport, don't left click, right click. So a range of reasons for that. Mostly if I've got something selected and I right click another viewport, it remains selected, and that's a very useful way to quickly move between viewports by right clicking. So just get used to right clicking. In this viewport we're going to try the F3 key. Yeah, there we go, skin goes on. F4 key, we can see the lines on top of the skin. Let's add a few more standard primitives. The cylinder comes in very handy. And the cylinder has a few more dimensions. So we've got the radius, which we can adjust over here, height of course, and we've got length segments, sides, which we can kind of figure out. By the way, what happens if we bring the sides right down? Hello, it's not a cylinder anymore. So if we adjust the sides, we can create other types of prisms quite easily. What that really means is you want the sides to be fairly high. 18 was the default that they suggested if you're going to make it look smooth. There are other ways of smoothing, but decide as you're building things whether they need additional help with more sides. The one that we haven't met yet is cap segments. Watch what happens if we increase cap segments. We start to divide what's on top here, and we divide it radially. So that can be useful for some model building. If you don't need it, don't have it. We always try and keep polygon count, the number of rectangles or triangles on the screen, we always try and keep that as low as possible to do the job that we want to do. High polygon count on some computers, if you get into ridiculous areas, will actually freeze the computer. So we've got two objects. Let's start doing things with them. The three operations that we'll learn straight away are found up here next to each other. There's select and move, rotate, and scale. Select and move, quite straightforward. We're going to do the moving right now in the perspective screen, and usually if we just try and move things around using our eyes, it's really hard to work out exactly where things are. 3ds gives us this really nice widget that appears when we try to do moving. And the reason that it's handy is that I can constrain my movement to this axis this way just by pointing at the green arrow and pulling, and then it will only move along that y-axis. Here's the x-axis, it'll only move along the x-axis, and here's the z-axis. So I can constrain quite easily. It may not be quite as clear. I'm going to come across to show you into the top view. Right click, remember, and here's that movement that we've looked at already. Have a look at this part of the widget over here. If I point into this sort of right angle that's connecting those two axes, I get a different cursor. It's changed from the pointer into a movement cursor, and I can now move freely on the plane defined by the x and y axes. The same widget is available here, but now of course I'm moving freely on the plane defined by the y and x axes. So you've got access to all of those wherever you're working, and you just choose the right bit to use. But next one is rotation, and rotation is done using a set of nested wheels, and we can again point at the x, y or z axis and then rotate on that axis alone. Now I'm going to let that go and then wonder exactly what angle that's at. I can see that down here. Actually it's 57.923 degrees rotated around on the y-axis. 0.923, that might not be very useful. I wonder if I could even get it back exactly to 0. Might be a bit hard. What I'm going to do is Control Z, and that will simply undo my action. Yeah, we're definitely at 0. And here's a big tip. Anytime you use rotation, if you can, and if it does the job for you, come up here to the area where we've got little magnets. And this is our snap system. And when we're doing rotation, I almost always try and use snap, unless there's a reason not to. And what does that do? Well, it means we're going to move by 5-degree increments. And when I get to 90 degrees, if that's what I was trying to do, I can let go, and we're exactly at 90 degrees. As you can see, I can rotate in all of the axes quite easily using the little widget. And Control Z will take me back if I wish to. And Control Z. Scaling. Scaling is quite important. It's another way of changing size. I can stretch on the X, Y or Z axis. And of course sometimes what I want to do is stretch. For instance, let's say I want to make the whole thing proportionally bigger in the cross section here, or proportionally bigger altogether. So I can point in between. So if we wanted to make it proportionally bigger in respect to its cross section, vertical cross section, then I can grab the part of the widget that lies in between the X and Y axis. By grabbing that, it will proportionally increase. If I point in the middle, it will proportionally increase or decrease the entire object. We're going to finish up today by having a look at the modifier section. So currently you're on this picture of the sun for create, and adjacent to that is modify. Whatever you select, you will see some additional parameters, or parameters that perhaps you're already used to, that are part of modification. Now what's going on here? We'll come back to the sun to create. We seem to have lost all of those parameters that are up here, and that's right. If we draw another box, I better get box first to do that. There it is. Parameters are all there. The moment I deselect it, and I can right click on the background to drop the box drawing cursor, I lose all the parameters there. I guess that's just the design philosophy for 3DS. Are they lost forever? In vector drawing we don't ever really lose the properties of objects, so we can come to modify, and we can see the same properties there, the height, the length, width and height, and our segments. So we can come back and add or remove segments to our heart's content on any object. Whatever object we click on here. Up the top here we see a name. This is a name created by 3ds. Once we start modelling, we need to give the parts that we model meaningful names. And there's at least one good reason for this, and I'm going to call this pipe, and enter. The reason I do this is that later on with complex models, we're going to start picking items to edit from a list. We do that up here, select by name, and when I open that up, pipe. You may not remember what your box 1 and box 2 and box 223 are, but pipe or pipe 1 or long pipe or whatever you need to call it is certainly the way to do it. So we need to start naming up here things. By the way, for beginning classes, we can make good use of colours, and the basic colours, if you like, the plastic moulding clay that we're using, can be set from here. Nothing very complicated. If you don't like the colours there, you can try and make some more from the slider up here. And those colours are easy to change, just like that. And you can actually do some basic modelling just by using those colour changes. Now, I've got a 3ds set, so each time I make a new object, it assigns a random colour. And there's a benefit to that. So each time I make a new object, I get a new colour. It's easy to pick things on the screen. Once you want to put them together, you can use that as colours. Now, later on, we'll learn about materials and exciting things we can do with that. But for now, having different colours is a good idea. So, what have we learned so far? Back to create. Standard primitives, different shapes that we can explore here. We can create them to different sizes just by drawing in our screen. We can modify parameters. We can come back here to the modify panel and find parameters even after we've drawn our objects. We can move things around. We know how to use the widget to pull different axes around, or pull it around on different axes. Rotate. Not much point in rotating a sphere, you would think, although it isn't a trivial matter, because you can see that the cut lines on the sphere do come up to a point at the top, so it's not actually completely symmetrical. And we can scale, whole object or along an axis. We know how to move to different viewpoints by right-clicking, and we've been reminded that in the future we may need to know how to turn on and off skin and edges. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and we'll get started on some modelling immediately in the next tutorial.